It was the summer of 2012, months after the North American release of Xenoblade, months before my sophomore year of high school. Little did I know this timing was going to shape my adulthood, but much heavier than that, I had no idea who the hell Monolith Soft was. I didn't have the benefits of growing up with Xenogears, nor did I have the foresight of how integral they'd end up being to Nintendo. All I needed to know was that they made other JRPGs on consoles I had access to. Xenosaga was the more relevant option, but I was a broke Nintendo fan, and at that time, Baten Kaitos was easier to find. And while that name was doomed to fall further and further into obscurity, it personally made sure I would never, ever forget it. No fucking way! Oh my god! Of course, not everybody was giving this remaster a hero's welcome, not just because it's niche, but because out of the dozens and dozens and dozens of Baten Kaitos fans, there is a surprising amount that are upset over the English dub's omission. The original game was notorious for its mediocre performances that sounded like they were delivered through a tin can.
A long time ago, when sky and earth were still apart, when the 5 continents were not yet afloat, a huge puddle of water, called the ocean, covered most of the land.
So funnily enough, instead of being stuck with that, we're now stuck with the original Japanese. And what's even funnier is that still means the opening cinematic is in English. For some reason, the Japanese version also has its own English dub.
It's unthinkable to act against the Empire?
It's unthinkable to act against the Empire?
The god of demise and destruction, the cursed power of Malpertio.
The god of demise and destruction, the cursed power of Marpetro.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nostalgic for the dub, but let's not get delusional. I've seen bitterness to the point of blaming the lack of dub for this game's lack of publicity. Come on now. If you are choosing to play an older, niche, Japanese RPG whose main characters look like this, then odds are you won't mind reading subtitles. But hey, I totally get it. I can empathize, because I wish I knew why the marketing was so weak. Why bother greenlighting a game that's already obscure if you're not gonna put effort in marketing it? Clearly not for the money, so I have to think it's for the passion, but even then, wouldn't you want to share that passion with a larger audience? I am so frustrated that the marketing refused to acknowledge Monolith Soft. Maybe it's some sort of legal or a copyright issue, but that doesn't make it any less stupid. You see their logo when you boot up the game. Imagine if that reveal trailer had a mere few seconds that stated from the creators of Xenoblade, or from the writer of Chrono Trigger. Sure, to most people, it wouldn't mean much, but to JRPG fans, your target audience by the way, those words hold much more weight than any of those trailers. It worked for me. Good video games are releasing constantly, so you need to use any sort of name or brand recognition to your advantage. I don't care who's to blame here. Whoever it is, they dropped the ball. A ball that was ever so gently handed to them. But now that negativity is out of the way, allow me to show you the results of that legacy. In honor of its 20th anniversary, let me introduce you to Monolith Soft's hidden gem, the classic that was meant to be forgotten, yet persisted nonetheless. This is Baten Kaitos 1, or as I know it, Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings, and the Lost Ocean. In this world, humanity lives on islands in the sky and are suitably able to project wings from their body. However, our main protagonist, Calus, was only born with one, his second being an artificial winglet made of Imperial technology. It isn't a perfect replacement, as the game begins with him recovering from an ambush in Moonguile Forest. The incident resulted in memory loss, not to Calus himself, but to his guardian spirit, me. That's right, although we are controlling Calus in gameplay, our true role is a spirit that watches over him. It may disappoint you to know that this is merely a storytelling device. Our choices don't have a real impact on the narrative. But trust me when I say, I wouldn't change a thing. At the very least, we can serve as Calus's better conscience, who stubbornly returns to Moonguile in search of its ancient ruins. There, we rescue a girl named Shella and uncover the forest's secret, a powerful artifact known as the End Magnus. Before we can process the commotion, the Empire suddenly arrives to confiscate the Magnus and imprison Shella for stealing the pendant that activated it. Encouraged by her adorable little animal friend named Mimai, we rush to pursue the Empire into the island's capital. But first, you must be wondering, what is a Magnus? Why is a card so valuable? Well, thankfully, there's no scalpers involved. By no means is this your Magic, or Yu-Gi-Oh, or any traditional card game. A Magnus is a card that can capture the essence of another object and store it for later use. In other words, they are just as integral to the lore as they are to the gameplay, be it as battle actions or consumable items. I'm not big on cards in video games, but I can't help but find it charming here. When you think about it, this is a rare video game where the amount of items the hero can carry actually makes sense. In fact, there are over 1,000 individual Magnus, many of which are hidden throughout the world. It kind of reminds me of the Korok seeds in Zelda or moons in Mario Odyssey. People will complain about how tedious it is to collect them all, but that isn't the point. The point is that there's something worthwhile in every nook and cranny. Sometimes games benefit from not appealing to completionists. Just ask the 100% speedrunners. I've never watched any of them, and I don't think I ever will. Magnus are undoubtedly the crux of why Baten Kaitos is so unique to this day, but there are a few blemishes that do reek of its time. The environments will often host a variety of objects that can be absorbed, such as fire, water, and food. This is such a cool idea in principle, but unfortunately, it mainly serves as glorified fetch quests. And there are a whole lot of fetch quests, both in the side content and the main story. If that wasn't already annoying, some Magnus can change over time. Oh, someone asked for milk? Well, you better hurry before it turns into yogurt, and then cheese. Nonetheless, we're able to free Shella and catch up to the Empire with different goals in mind. While Shella wants to end Magnus, Calus is more concerned with a personal vendetta. His grandfather and younger brother were murdered by the Emperor's right-hand man, Giacomo. They'll both have to wait, as Giacomo easily disposes of us and escapes. We'll make our own escape in the meantime, so Shella can enlighten us on the Empire's scheme. In each of the 5 nations lies an End Magnus, and with their powers combined, the Emperor will call upon a god of destruction known as Malpertio. Calus doesn't really give a shit, but Shella insists we travel together since we share a common foe. From the humble abode of Sadal Suud to the vibrant clouds of Diadem, we quickly stumble into the favorite trope of this game. The plot can't continue until we thoroughly walk around town. In this case, we meet a gentle Imperial named Liud, and we learn more of the legends of Malpertio. Long ago, the Earth's surface had an ocean inhabiting a giant whale, until Malpertio came along and swallowed them whole. If only it kept swallowing. Our path to the capital is blocked by the flooded Celestial River, but luckily there's a buff fisherman named Gibari. After helping us unclog the drain, he guides us to King Laocoon, whose castle is being stormed by the Empire. Though we can save his knights, we're too late to stop him from surrendering with the unwavering confidence of not being harmed. With the Empire's corruption in plain sight, Liu turns against them and stands by our side. Fending off the invasion grants us permission to unseal the end Magnus before it falls to the Empire, which we technically succeed at. I blame Laocoon for jinxing it. Still, it doesn't hurt to have a whole nation on our side, so it's off to the next continent to build our alliance further. And since we have more than a full party's worth, how about we finally get into the combat? This is where the cards will turn off a lot of gamers, but remember, this isn't a TCG. If you've ever played a turn-based battle system, it's more familiar than you'd think. Picture a standard turn-based menu with attacks, defense, items, etc. Now, imagine if each individual action was shuffled into a deck, and it's our job to play a string of cards when we're attacking and defending. A card is drawn as soon as one is played, and if a party member decks out, they'll have to spend a turn reshuffling. Those rules should be straightforward, but what pushes the battle system to another level is combos. Each card will have up to 4 numbers that can be selected via the right analog stick. Similar to poker, we want to chain as many identical numbers as we can, or if we're feeling really bold, we can go for a straight. Either way, our attack or defense will be amplified to various extents. A word of warning though, any extraneous cards will ruin a combo. A 3-6-3-6 will count as 2 pairs, and a 1-2-3-4 will be a straight, but a single odd one out and they won't count as anything. Throw in opposing elements and there's plenty of strategy involved, but that's what makes it exciting. Thanks to the combo system, I'm never resting on my laurels. The risk-reward is constantly on my mind. The profit of a big combo is appealing by itself, but the temptation becomes irresistible by virtue of sheer luck. Even if we're 1 or 2 cards short of a combo, there's that unavoidable hope that maybe, just maybe, we're about to draw them right now. Most of all, what makes the combat so ingenious is that it is human nature to enjoy lining up pairs and straights. It takes a simple pleasure that many of us will do anyway and turns it into an addicting pendulum of emotional highs and lows. That being said, I do have 2 major criticisms. The first is not even its fault. Unlike the GameCube, modern controllers don't have notches. And without them, it is deceptively easy to pick the wrong number on a card. I cannot tell you how many times that messed up a lengthy combo. This frustrated me to no end, and before you ask, no, I don't have drift. The second relates to the type of offense available. There's a wide variety. Special attacks are powerful combo enders, SP combos are niches that mainly serve as cute surprises, and spirit attacks are overpowered miracles that randomly appear based on our bonds with Callus. But despite all of those options, there's something extremely basic that's missing here. There are 0 attacks that target multiple opponents. Even though there's a maximum of 3, having to take them down one by one can feel like an eternity. It's especially troubling at the beginning because of how limited the party is. It takes a while until we're allowed a decent amount of cards. And here's the kicker. The remaster can speed things up to 300%, but it sacrifices the time we need to pick our cards. It doesn't compensate at all, so unless we're mindlessly grinding, this feature is essentially useless. Worst of all, it isn't just the combat. The entire first act is slow in general. Not that it's bad, but it takes a while to understand why the game is special. If you haven't noticed, I've been going at a fast pace to try to make up for it. Baten Kaitos 2, aka Origins, went out of its way to solve these issues. The turns are active time-based, certain attacks can hit multiple enemies, and the adventure kicks off on an explosive note. Some might be turned off by there only being 3 party members, but to be blunt, they have more chemistry than our party combined. Really, the sole caveat is how punishing the bosses are right out the gate. Hands down, I do consider Origins to be the superior video game. Even though it's a prequel, I recommend it if you don't like a slow start. Things are about to pick up very soon. It's gonna get worse before it gets better, but there is a reason why I prefer Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean. In the verdant island of Anuenue, we're immediately welcomed right into its festive capital, Como Mai. The party has to wait, however, as Queen Corellia doesn't exactly buy our story, due in part to a visit from the despicable Emperor himself, freaking Geldablame. With our tails between our legs, we're given a suspiciously convenient direction towards the abandoned Library of Magic. So much for abandoned, there are ghosts everywhere, and the soundtrack has the gall to chime in with the most laughably cliché jump scares. Apparently this theme has been reused in several pieces of media. I can't find any confirmation, but I wouldn't be surprised. It sounds like stock music. Definitely an outlier in an otherwise exquisite soundtrack. Once we return these books to their proper shelves like a minimum wage job, it turns out it was worth even less. It was all a ruthless ploy by one of Giacomo's underlings, Folan. Imbued by Malpercio's strength, Folan overwhelms us until we're saved by a badass hunter named Savina. Savina invites us to a waterfall village, but refuses to hold our hands, and quite frankly, I don't blame her, because I'd never want to navigate Hollow Jungle ever again. Rather than an interesting maze or puzzle, the screen is just littered with so much greenery that it is nearly impossible to see. After some more filler, Savina leads us to the Celestial Tree in order to seize the End Magnus. We do rescue a child along the way, but there are more important things to discuss, such as this remaster. This is the best version of Baten Kaitos simply because of the quality of life features. The game is saddled with classic JRPG growing pains, namely the fetch quests and level design. Enemies respawn as soon as you leave the screen, including encounters that are forced even when encounters are turned off. I may have breezed through them, but the Celestial River, Library, and Jungle would have been agonizing without the quality of life. As I've alluded to, this isn't anywhere near a flawless remaster. Once in a blue moon, the opponent's action won't properly work, but at least that's to our benefit. On a technical level, while the timeless art is elevated, there are frame drops in busy areas, and it seems like no matter where we are, things might get slightly choppy. Nothing to worry about, it isn't a big deal whatsoever. Except for these offensively egregious boss fights! I don't know what's in the water, but I cannot believe the state of it. The original wasn't like this. Boy, do I wish the speed up didn't sabotage the player. And in case you misheard, yes, I did say fights plural. Liud accuses Savina of being an Imperial spy, but he really should have kept his mouth shut. He ends up being wrong anyway. I guess it was her idea of a joke, but if only she knew how twisted it was. On the bright side, we actually obtain the End Magnus for once and successfully convince the Queen to join the Alliance. Look, I'll be the first to admit, Anuenue was rough. But I am delighted to say that Baten Kaitos is about to become special. It is mostly up from here. Leave it to the Empire to prove me wrong by crashing our ship down in the Trail of Souls. This does give us a moment to refamiliarize our party members. Savina is a drifter searching for her purpose, led to our company thanks to a fortune teller's vision. Liud is a soft boy who is struggling to handle the guilt for betraying his homeland. Gibari is so amiable that he pretty much just went with the flow. He mainly keeps Callus well behaved whenever he's being a downer, which is not uncommon because Callus is an asshole. He's been the least receptive of making friends and saving the world, even when we harass him about it. He is slowly warming up, offering a prayer to the mythical ocean for our survival. This is the same prayer that Shella recited to her fallen comrades, and one that she claims belongs to her nation. Although we've been with Shella the longest, we oddly know the least about her, but that'll have to wait because the true protagonist has come to save the day. The great Mizuti casually strolls by with a song and is willing to guide us out of the trail. The path is represented by a shoot-'em-up minigame that climaxes with a phallic boss fight. The great Mizuti understandably departs, and as quirky and strange as that was, this is just the beginning. Welcome to Mira, the land of illusions, one of the most memorable sequences of not just this game, but any JRPG, period. As amazing as the art has been, the world design itself has been relatively tame, but this is where it gets unhinged, starting with a confectionery village. In the presence of Melodia, the granddaughter of Mira's duke, Callus makes an outstanding first impression by awkwardly bumping into her. We really were meant to be, Callus. Speaking of an introvert's nightmare, we run into an old friend of his, Trill, who has heard rumors of a shining Magnus in the nearby mystical garden. Mystical is underselling it. Not only does it have its own gravitational laws, it also simulates a fellow Namco classic, the Tower of Drauga. There's even weed that vanishes in 30 minutes, just like real life. It does conclude on an underwhelming note. We slice up a giant card to receive a mere shadow of the end Magnus. The genuine article must have been relocated, but it is Melodia's disappearance that ends up the talk of town. Since she was last seen with us, we're locked away with but a single reasonable means of escape: eating. Trill doesn't seem to agree, revealing that the kidnappers were spotted in, far and away, the most demented area in the game: Picture Book Village. I mean, look at it! Do I have to say anything? Words wouldn't do it justice. And despite each and every pixel of hysteria, the citizens are just partying away without a care, showing that sometimes it really is all about perspective. Or weed. Probably weed. Ironically, the most normal person here, a fortune teller, informs us that unlike every other being, Callus has no Magnus of his own, meaning he practically has no soul. So yeah, something we already knew. The investigation takes us to the Shrine of Spirits, where we originally bonded with Callus in the first place. Surprise, surprise, the kidnappers were Giacomo's crew, who get bailed out by another phallic demon! I'm starting to see why we haven't met any other guardian spirits. It's not worth it. It's a good thing Melodia has a knack for communicating with otherworldly spirits and creatures. She politely asks the demon to leave with a smile so sweet, yet mildly threatening. Melodia may be in safe hands, but her kidnapping was a small wrinkle in a much bigger mystery. Our end Magnus is missing. We had one job to protect one stinking card, and we managed to mess it up? It's so implausible that the group points fingers at each other until Shella calms them down. It'll certainly help our sanity to find the capital rather ordinary. It does stand out as being Callus's home, and while the civilians fondly remember his grandfather, he doesn't get nearly as warm of a welcome himself. He's been bullied for not having a natural pair of wings ever since he was a child. There's no time to sulk though, as Duke Calbrin reveals that the end Magnus has been sealed beneath his manor. Giacomo begs to differ, but we have our own trump card in store. The Great Mizuti, whose goal was to protect the Magnus all along. And there's no better racetrack than the Labyrinth of Mirrors, the last of Mira's illusions. I take this over the jungle any day. It's actually not as confusing as it looks, so I have a soft spot for it. Despite the Great Mizudi saving the day, the End Magnus is stolen again, and since the last one is in the Empire, they finally take back the pendant to unseal it. Melodia offers her ship to give chase, and with the stakes at their highest, we're spared just one night to reflect. Gibari and Savina are still expecting a betrayal, and while Shella reaffirms her faith in Callus, it's hard to deny the possibility. For the first time on our journey, Callus looks sad. On the GameCube version, this is where we'd have to insert the second of 2 discs. What a cliffhanger! A somber end to the wildest part of the game. And yet what lies ahead will be the most extraordinary. We set sail for Alfard, the Empire, in hopes of intel from Liud's family. And high hopes they were, as his siblings are douchebags. On the other hand, his foster nurse is an angel, but even angels can be pushed too far. Grandma is packing! She spits out Geldablame's location before making a tragic sacrifice. As if the universe didn't hate Liud enough, he isn't allowed to grieve with the army on our tail. We lift off towards the battleship Goldoba, but instead of Geldablame, we're met by a ton of security robots led by Giacomo, Folin, and AIM. Meanwhile, Geldablame is headed for the final End Magnus, with even the stolen one in his possession. Giacomo refers to Callus as the Divine Child, and tries to convince him to join his side, but you already know that he isn't having any of that. And thus ensues the most difficult encounter yet, the Chaotic Trio. They sure live up to their name, because it legitimately took me 3 tries to defeat them. As I've stated before, 3-on-3 can take a long time, so apply that to a boss battle and you've got a war of attrition. There is a silver lining in Chaotic Dance, a boss theme so unhinged you'd think it came out of Mira. This song plays whenever we have to fight any of the trio, and I don't care how jarring it is to the rest of the soundtrack, it is a banger. I could listen to it all day. It'll never get old to me. Never. Defeated at last, Giacomo resents the power Callus received from Grandpa Georg, as he was supposed to receive it for being Georg's son! So does this mean Giacomo is Callus's estranged father? Well, he certainly acts like one by pressing self-destruct to forever leave us hanging. We do get a bit of insight. After escaping the explosion, Liud recalls a mad scientist named Georg who died in an accident a decade ago. This contradicts the Georg that Callus knew, who passed away only 2 years ago. The End Magnus lies in the lava caves of Azha, a barren village recently massacred by the Empire. Notably, Liud refused to take part in this operation, while Savina was traumatized by her involvement. We enter the lava caves in time to retrieve Shella's pendant, just for it to shatter from the uniting End Magnus. They summon Cor Hydrae, a demonic castle belonging to Malpertio, and the ancient god itself is channeled by Geldablame, somehow making him uglier. What's almost as vile is his ability to one-hit KO us, including at the very beginning of the fight. It's an uphill battle from the get-go, but for the alleged god of destruction, it is surprisingly doable. And that's because Malpertio isn't a single god to begin with. The 5 End Magnus are actually the remains of 5 separate gods. A mortal like Geldablame could never withstand their might, but together they can stitch into the grotesque abomination known as Malpertio. Melodia orders the Empire to launch Geldablame into the abyss, revealing herself as the true orchestrator of Malpertio's revival. She had been stringing Geldablame along, using his corruption and dominance to carry out her plan. Her kidnapping in Mira was but a ruse, and she even personally delivered the End Magnus that was stolen from us. But she wasn't the thief, for that was a betrayal far worse than her own. There was a traitor in the party. There was a companion we knew nothing about. Their name is Callus, who handed Melodia the Magnus when she faked tripping into him. Callus would have done anything to avenge his family, and our spiritual bonding was merely a step in achieving the power he needed. Now that Giacomo and Geldablame are defeated, it's his turn to hold up his end of the bargain by serving as Malpertio's vessel. And by doing so, Callus obtains the pair of beautiful white wings he's always wanted. Callus no longer needs us, and despite our pleas, we have no choice but to slowly disappear, to fade away with no hope for the world. And our last glimpse, it's Destroyer. As any fan of Monolith Soft will attest, they have set a high bar for storytelling. Xenoblade has tarnished a lot of other JRPGs for me. But if you were to ask me about the greatest plot twists in gaming, Baten Kaitos has to be among the top of that list. The best plot twists are the ones you never see coming, yet become so obvious with the benefit of hindsight. Perhaps it's less effective to a viewer, but speaking as a player, you never expect the main protagonist to be the villain. That's a rare occurrence to this day, so imagine how shocking it is when that protagonist directly speaks to you. Our bond with Callus is emphasized throughout the entire game. Since we're with him all the time, we never have any genuine reason to suspect him. The exchange with Melodia comes off like an awkward interaction, when in reality, it is the only opportunity for that to happen without us noticing. And in a subtle yet ingenious detail, not only is Callus the one to notice the missing Magnus, but he's also the one who brings it up in the first place. Why would the thief cause any attention to their crime? Because that's exactly what he wants you to think. In fact, our spiritual bonding is a minefield of gaslighting. For example, he acts like he needs our advice when it comes to trusting the party, thereby making us feel traitorous for even suggesting there's a traitor. But what is most lost in a spectator's perspective are the interludes. After each end Magnus is discovered, a feminine voice joyously expresses our inevitable doom. The player should be able to deduce that the voice belongs to Melodia, but either way, it is providing a legitimate mystery to solve while distracting from the real plot twists. And that's why I respect the hell out of it. It takes full advantage of us being a player as well as a character, not just a witness of the story. Now that I'm replaying it, wow, it feels so obvious, like they gave us all the hints we needed, but I promise you it wasn't. In retrospect, of course the traitor would be the biggest asshole of the party. It's common sense that's overshadowed by a plethora of reasons, whether as a guardian spirit or as a player. What is most noticeable though, is how Callus has major trust issues. He is skeptical of every party member, especially poor Lude. I swear, it's as if Callus is perpetually bracing himself to be deceived. Even when the Great Mizudi was our only chance at survival, he was still hesitant to rely on them. This may be a defense mechanism due to trauma, but it gives the impression of projecting onto others, like no one deserves his trust because he doesn't deserve to be trusted. Last but not least, despite the prior instance of gaslighting, this is sincerely the first time Callus appears to be sad. And considering he then pleads with the ocean for forgiveness, this may be the truest look at Callus we've ever had.
どうしたのミーマイ。 誰かいるの？あなたなの？
Our story is far from over. We awaken to Shella and Mimai confined in an Imperial fortress. Since we're no longer connected to Callus, we're free to bond with Shella, giving her the strength to break out of her prison cell. Looks like we're not her only savior. 3 witches refer to her as Queen and treat her like one with a huge, majestic dragon. Despite their nations being under attack, the Alliance leaders insist that we rescue our party members first. Each of them is being held at an interdimensional crack in areas formerly containing the end Magnus. There we'll encounter a fetch quest and a boss fight, all of which are harmless except for the cursed celestial tree. We have to climb all the way up just to realize we need a seed back in Komomai, the same place this quest began! Regardless, now that everyone's safe and sound, the Great Mizudi proposes the Icelands of Wazin as preparation for confronting Callus. Wazin has isolated itself from the rest of the world for centuries, and it was doing a favor, because trekking through its snow sucks. What seems like a dead end becomes a gorgeous paradise, with Shella leading the way. Turns out, Shella isn't just some random girl we saved in a forest. She is the queen of Wazin on a mission to prevent Malpertio's rebirth. The 3 witches had been under her command, disguised as fortune tellers that have guided us along the way. And since it hasn't quite worked out, her backup plan is an artifact that can reflect the god's power, the Ocean Mirror. The mirror must be earned through the trial of the dragon, and I use the word earn generously, because it is literally up to luck! That's one way to protect a sacred treasure, drive the challenger insane! With the mirror and the white dragon on our side, it's time to liberate the Empire from Melodia's control. Except there's oddly no reward for saving its civilians, so we got places to be. The Imperial Fortress is swarming with security robots, broken elevators, and questionable potty training? No wonder our prison break was easy. The worst part is getting blue-balled by having to fetch a handful of water. We do hit a snag with one of Melodia's cronies, but even a god couldn't turn him into a demon worth fearing. No. That is an honor reserved for Callus, who is one step away from fully resurrecting Malpertio. In spite of his newfound power, he doesn't have the heart to go all out, even when the cards are stacked against him. But Melodia is as clever as she is sadistic. By defeating Callus, our heroes have inadvertently proved themselves as capable of completing Malpertio's rebirth. 5 continents, 5 desecrated gods, and now 5 unwilling mortals. Together, they can merge the 5N Magnus into one. What Melodia didn't account for is the Ocean Mirror, which serves its purpose to a horrifying degree. And although Callus begs her to finish him off, Shella cannot bear to see him die so brutally. Her reluctance grants Melodia a chance to shatter the mirror, leaving no opposition towards her ritual. Malpertio has returned. Callus tries to fight back, but those wings were never his. Their rightful owner, Melodia, commands him to kill our friends. All that stands in his way is Mimai, our voice, and the ocean's prayer.
歌を捨て明日を葬る我らを時よいつか許したまえ
In what is the rawest scene in the game, Callus rejects Malpertio by tearing off the white wing he had desired his whole life. This allows the true protagonist, the Great Mizudi, to cast a debilitating spell on Malpertio, forcing Melodia to retreat for the time being. Callus is left unconscious, providing us a glimpse into his past. His little brother Fi was infatuated by the myth of the lost ocean and its giant wise whale. Not wanting to crush his dreams, Calus promised Fi that they would go on a journey to find them. As we know, they and their grandfather would end up being attacked by the Empire. While Calus and Fi escaped, Georg refused to follow Giacomo's orders, instead throwing himself into the flames. Calus and Fi did make it to the Shrine of Spirits, but the latter succumbed to his injuries. Before passing on, Fi apologized for breaking their promise, urging his brother to find the ocean and its whale in his memory. Now without a family, Calus was left to shoulder that burden alone. But today, he'll no longer have to. Awakening to his friends, Calus wants nothing more than to put a stop to Malpercio's terror. And as Gabari says best, he's one hell of a kid to babysit. Shella returns the winglet Georg made for him, but it wouldn't be the Calus we know without the spiritual bond between us. As heartwarming as this scene is, some will criticize the power of friendship and how the betrayal was a waste since it lasted so briefly. You may be sharing those thoughts as well. While I agree to a certain extent, calling it a waste would be missing the entire point. The betrayal is the core of the narrative. None of these events would have happened without it. Calus needed Melodia to get revenge on the Empire. Melodia needed Calus because, as Geldablame demonstrated, ordinary mortals cannot host Malpercio. And we needed them to work together because otherwise we all wouldn't have met and had the strength to take down Geldablame. This isn't a twist for shock value. There are 3 different parties here with individual goals that could not have been achieved without each other. That's why we're so eager to welcome back Calus, along with the fact that he was never evil to begin with. He's been apathetic, but he never shared Melodia's ill will. Hell, he didn't even care about Malpercio until he heard about its involvement with the ocean. He was just so desperate to overcome the Empire, he was willing to risk everything. And after seeing how his friends have accepted him despite everything, all he wants now is to own up to his mistakes. He may be an asshole, but he's our asshole. Seeing as we were bailed out by the Great Mizuri's magic, we're hoping to get assistance from their race, the Children of the Earth, who live below the Toxiclouds. Toxiclouds is a straightforward name, but this wasn't always the case. The remaster came with a few script changes, and although they are minor, I did notice one significant downgrade: these pigeons. In the remaster, Calus gives a description of them like he does everything else, but in the original version, pigeons. Pigeons. That's it. Pigeons. Jokes aside, I don't care about any of the changes, but I'm sure they're bound to offend some edgy traditionalists. And oh, as for the Toxiclouds, they used to be called the...
Let's start with the taint clouds.
So, underneath the taint is a labyrinth where the remaster is inarguably a blessing. It happens to neighbor the Great Mizuri's home village, where we're instantly met by an unsettling epiphany. The Great Mizuri isn't great? Their parents essentially reveal that they have main protagonist syndrome. Humorously, the game temporarily removes the great from Mizuri. Who is great though is the Great Comro, the tribe leader who enlightens us of their people's history. The 5 gods who became Magnus were originally vanquished by the Children of the Earth. In order to salvage the Earth, they raised the parts that were unpolluted into the sky, becoming the nations we know today. They remained on the surface in the meantime to help purify the Earth, gradually losing power as a result. However, the 3 artifacts they used against the gods still exist: the Ocean Mirror, the Earth Sphere, aka Shella's Pendant, and the Sword of the Heavens. Since the former two have broken, the sword will have to do. It is supposedly located in the Garden of Death, a hike as painful as was in snow, but the reality is much worse. Some children of the Earth are discontent with life under the toxic clouds, so their leader, Crumley, wants to surrender to Malpertio with the sword! His idea is so stupid, it's a mystery how he climbed Zosma Tower, an enormous test of intelligence. We have to solve a couple of block puzzles that make this dungeon one of the most unique yet difficult. But have no fear, back in my heyday, I 100%ed Catherine, so this was a piece of cake. We weren't quite fast enough to prevent Crumley's offering, but Malpertio viciously assaults him anyway. Whoa, slow down with the plot twist, game. While the sword is able to dissuade the god, it merely redirects its attention to Crumley's tribe. To secure our retreat, the Great Comro and his followers intend on fighting to the death, but as proof of his resolve, Callus refuses to surrender the lives of others. And upon their harm, the Great Mizuti has finally had enough. The true protagonist unleashes a blast so powerful, it topples Malpertio and even breaks her own mask. Thanks to her, our first encounter with the god goes well enough to drive it away, but not before destroying the third and final artifact. To compensate, the children of the Earth agree to join the Alliance and conjure up another plan. There's no rest for the wary though. Out of nowhere, Callus is summoned by the doctor who treated him at the very beginning of our adventure. Larakush, former lab partner of Georg, ready to confess the truth. The two were hired by Geldablame to create a living being made purely of Magnus. It would then be exploited so that Geldablame could achieve eternal life. This hypothetical perfect being was referred to as the Divine Child, a name you might remember Giacomo calling Callus. But Callus isn't the Divine Child, rather, he was a failed attempt, hence his one wing. And by experimenting on him, they were eventually able to create the Divine Child entity, his little brother, Fee. Georg became attached to Callus and Fee as if they were his own family, so in order to protect their futures, Georg and Larakush faked their deaths by setting the laboratory aflame. As heavy as this revelation is, I have to point out how awkwardly it's conveyed. When Callus wonders why the witch couldn't detect any Magnus in him, Larakush compares it to how people wouldn't recognize blood as any color other than red. That's a fair analogy, but the way he explains it is so needlessly long and complicated, it's like he's trying to hit the word count for an essay. It's hilarious. According to the doctor, Georg left a gift for Callus hidden in the Celestial Alps. Though it's home to a bunch of obnoxious wildlife, there seems to be no humans in sight, except for seemingly the undead. After surviving the explosion, Giacomo, Aim, and Folan avoided the Imperial chaos and have been lying in wait since. Now that we're face to face, the trio can't help themselves from yet another chaotic dance. While the rematch doesn't change much of the strategy, that does not mean we're prepared. Once again, the chaotic trio is giving us our toughest and lengthiest battle yet. It took me 4 tries, one more than last time, each of them a minimum of 15 minutes. If you're not good at math, that's an hour. The main sticking point, what drives me up the wall, is the degenerate items. Not only can they heal each other, but specifically Aim can buff defense. And the longer this battle goes, the less of a chance we have. Even when those two are down, our resources might not keep up because of Giacomo spamming turns. But through hell or high water, we do it, just to be met by Callus on the floor. He's knocked out so hard, he comes to a realization. Fee didn't die in his arms. It was Callus on the brink of death. He wouldn't have survived that night if it wasn't for the Divine Child giving him his remaining life force. Giacomo intends to correct that mistake, but amidst his rage unveils the gift his father made for Callus. A new and improved winglet, setting the stage for what will be an epic cutscene where Callus triumphs over... What?! I wish I was kidding. I wish I was trolling you, but no! We fight them again in the same exact battle! And guess what? This one took me 3 tries, so that's a total of 7 fights coupled with some cutscenes. If you're not good at math, that's 2 hours! I couldn't believe it back then. I still can't believe it now. Was this their idea of a joke? Because it is nearly satirical how there's an attack called Lingering Time. And you know what? While we're at it, I've just gotta say it. It's been staring at me all playthrough. What is going on with Giacomo's ab window? You're a military commander. Who does that? I don't care what anyone says. That is more distracting than any anime cleavage. Maybe that's on me. Maybe chaotic dance is the perfect theme, because I can't help myself from... Giacomo has been slain once and for all, for real this time, and with his dying breath, he orders his comrades to join us. He yearned for the divine child to overthrow the empire, but unlike Melodia, he's not too keen about Malpertio. Along with Giacomo, Aim and Folan were experimented on by Georg, so they're not too thrilled about serving Callus either. I can't blame them. After all that tomfoolery, I just want to get my hands on Malpertio. But before that, there is a batch of optional side quests that revolve around our party members. While it isn't imperative, we'll go over them briefly as there is some nice character development. Shella investigates rumors about a forbidden book of magic. It is supposedly the work of ancient Wazin, which quickly becomes clear when it transports us to an ice labyrinth. Wazin must love guessing games, because that's what this is. Pick the right door, or fight a group of enemies. Still, we do get a look at Shella's upbringing, most notably her promise to return the ocean to its people. On the flip side, Gibari's storyline is forgettable. To heal a major illness in his hometown, Gibari tells us to go north to the Greater Celestial River. Except it's all the way over here, so thanks, Gibari. The cure must be found by fishing, but instead of a cliché minigame, it's up to Gibari and his longtime rival, Reblis. It's supposed to be an amusing cutscene, but if you ask me, they should get a room. I'm personally more interested in why you can slap an old lady, like what the hell? Liud meets his arch-nemesis yet again, that being the universe and its hatred for him. On the Phantom Goldoba, he's subjected to visions of his family and countrymen who gaslight him relentlessly. Just when he's losing purpose, he remembers his foster nurse's words and regains his conviction to finish the phallic phantom. In a twist of fate, Savina ends up returning to Azha with a shot at redeeming her crimes. After navigating a desert maze with oases as checkpoints, she hesitates to kill a parent who was turned into a demon. When their daughter is targeted, she's able to go through with it, but it is her remorse that deserves her first step at forgiveness. The Great Mizuti's childhood friends has followed the Great Comro into a dangerous ritual. Why is it dangerous? Well, for starters, it's back at Zosma Tower, but have no fear, as someone who 100%ed Catherine, why was this so hard? The lower floors are ironically a step up from our previous climb, and honestly, I am a sucker for these puzzles, so I'm not actually complaining. I will bemoan the fact that saving the day involves another test of luck! Of all the minigames, why bring back the bottom of the barrel? Overall, I would say the best of these quests are Liud's and Savina's. Both of their dungeons have a distinct hook, and their portrayal of trauma is among the top of this game's storytelling. With that, the Alliance has figured out their strategy. They're going to use the power of each of their islands to infiltrate Cor Hydrae. This does risk them falling back down to the earth, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. While the nations throw everything they have, it still isn't enough, leaving them open to Malpercio's forces. That is, until Aim and Folan step in for the Empire, thereby uniting the continents to break through the castle's defenses. Though Malpercio is awaiting us, we'll have to earn his presence by defeating 5 apparitions representing the End Magnus. Each of them occupy different corners of the castle, yet no matter where we go, it is crawling with demons. But we've come too far to lose to false deities. Nothing was going to stop us from reaching Malpercio. Melodia taunts Calus for losing his divinity, but all he has left for her is empathy. He swears to bring her back home and to let her god rest in peace. Judging by its performance, it looks like it needs it. It very much resembles the encounter on the surface, almost as if it's holding something back. And it's not the only one. In an attempt to curb her delusions of grandeur, Calbrin reveals a dark secret about Melodia. It has long been common knowledge that her parents succumbed to a plague, but there has been one victim who was always kept a secret: Melodia. Refusing to handle the grief, Calbrin used the End Magnus to restore her back to life, similar to what Fee did for Calus. But by doing so, he cursed her with an uncontrollable impulse to serve Malpercio. Blindsided by an existential crisis, Melodia scolds Calbrin for not letting her die and settles with the alternative, returning her energy to her god, allowing it to ascend to its true form. The Divine Child temporarily shields us from its devastation, but there's no hiding forever. On the top of Cor Hydrae lies our final showdown with the ancient god of destruction. And a worthy battle it is. This is far and away the most difficult fight in the game. Malpercio lives up to its reputation with destructive damage, attacks that drain HP, and the ability to change elements to boot. This is the only time I had to take a break and go level grinds, with 70 as my goal, but for one reason or another I was compelled to stop short. I had faith that if we dug deep enough, we already had the means to defeat Malpercio. And by the skin of our teeth, a single turn away from death, we proved that even a god bows down to a strength in numbers. With Malpercio on its last legs, Calus does the unthinkable. He somehow plunges into the god and pulls out Melodia himself. No longer tainted by evil, Melodia's hair returns to its natural color, a seemingly inconsequential twist that gains depressing implications after Origins. By combining the power of Calus's and Melodia's Magnus, as well as one of a guardian spirit, the holy artifacts are repaired to vanquish Malpercio for good. And as the god disintegrates, Shella pays her respects by reciting the ocean's prayer. After making our getaway from the castle's collapse, we're met with an Earth free of toxiclouds. Though the islands descend as predicted, they find a safe landing in their respective End Magnus. Their apparitions become their foundation, creating an inhabitable surface, albeit still without an ocean. A victory banquet is held in Como Mai, where everyone acknowledges the uncertain future, yet are optimistic nonetheless. The lone exception is Shella, who leaves the celebration without saying a word. Calus follows her back to Moonguile Forest, confirming his suspicions. All along, Shella had known about Calus and Melodia's plan, having witnessed her causing the memory loss that began our journey. Not wanting to be detected, Shella then had Mimai escort Callus over to be treated by Larakush. When Callus pries further, she introduces herself as the last of the Ice Queens. Just like the children oversaw the Earth, Wazn was entrusted with protecting the ocean. Before it could be polluted like the surface, the ocean was sealed into the Ice Queen to be passed down generation to generation. And now that the Earth has returned to humanity, it is time for the lost ocean to be returned to the Earth. Since the three of us shared a spiritual bond, Shella needs our help to set the ocean free. Though her fate is unknown, refusing would undermine everything we've done for this world. And so we offer the ocean's prayer. The words we've long since memorized through grief, yet never imagined would befit our own.
Hitori, 夜の底を行く我らを歌をして明日を葬る我らをされば子らよいざ行こえとこしないに我が胸にありがとうカラス
Just as I'm verging on tears, my grief turns into disgust as freaking Geldablame's hideous spirit has come seeking revenge. It might be frightening without a third party member, but that doesn't mean Callus and Shella are alone. By executing a spirit attack, we can land a guaranteed one-hit KO and send Geldablame back to hell where he belongs. As satisfying as that was, reality sinks in of the Emperor being the Queen's last battle. Surrounded by her brethren, Callus and Shella confess their love for each other before she vanishes into the sky, returning to the earth a downpour that forms its long-lost ocean. And as the finishing touch, throughout our journey, there have been countless whale-like creatures in each and every corner of the planet. All of them reunite into the giant mythical whale, finally restoring the ocean to its former glory. Now that humanity is saved and Fi's promise is completed, our spiritual bond isn't needed anymore. It's time for us to return to our world and hopefully continue to make meaningful bonds. But before we say goodbye, there's been an elephant in the room. What does Baten Kaitos even mean? In our world, Baten Kaitos is a star in a constellation resembling a whale. This is clearly an allusion to the ocean's whale, but did you realize why Fi was obsessed with it? The whale inspired Fi as a child's beloved fairy tale, and if we were to wish upon a star, we may behold something truly magical. With the gang back together, we take our turns saying goodbye to each of our party members, backed up by every single ally we've made along the way, no matter how minor. All of them are here with the sole purpose of our departure. And as we slowly fade away from their chorus of cheers, that's when it hit me. The same melancholy in leaving best friends. Because despite the lack of choice in this adventure, they made sure I felt like a part of them. But grief doesn't cover it. No, what makes this ending so wondrous is a nearly indescribable sensation. One that cements this story as its own magical fairy tale. As they waved goodbye, it was as if I felt every emotion I could ever feel at once. But in the end, happiness triumphed. That was Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings, and the Lost Ocean. To say the least, that was a change of pace from Monolith Soft's other works, so much so that you might be questioning the title of Xenoblade's forgotten predecessor. But a few of you might have noticed something. Something that I didn't realize for years. Baten Kaitos did end up influencing Xenoblade, specifically Xenoblade 2. And I'm talking full spoilers here, so if you'd like to avoid that, this is your cue to skip ahead. These are two of my favorite games of all time, so perhaps deep down I had always known that they have a lot in common. Their English dubs are flawed, their tutorials are not good, their overworld mechanics are needlessly cumbersome, they both use stored EXP, they both have an unconventional battle system that focuses on combos yet may come across as slow at the start, in which case you'll prefer their faster paced prequels. Origins even has a combat announcer just like Xenoblade 2.
Yeah!
Blado combo 13! Great!
There's an elderly animal companion that hides in a protagonist's hood, there's a humorous party member with severe protagonist syndrome that actually backs it up, both of their fourth chapters are over the top, their final bosses begin with Mal, the actual final boss is as abrupt and hideous as Torna's, they feature life on sky continents that return to the Lost Ocean at the end of the game while their heroes ride a dragon. Their female lead sacrifices herself for the good of the world, but is implied to be saved by a divine entity. The real tragedy is patching out a meme, Cosmos is usable in battle, and using the self-referential Monolith and Tri-Crescendo pens will form the Holy Grail. Guess what Aegis is called in Japanese? Heaven's Holy Grail! In all seriousness, this is just for fun. Xenoblade 2 obviously did not copy Baten Kaitos. And even if it did it much better. As nostalgic as it was to revisit Baten Kaitos, I wouldn't have beaten it again if it wasn't for the quality of life. The visuals have aged so well that it should be celebrated, but instead it merely accentuates how outdated the game design is. The slow start is just the beginning. The pacing is repeatedly bogged down by filler. Not to sound like a broken record, but I cannot understate the fetch quests. I didn't even bother covering half of them. It's a shame because through all of its tedium really is magic. The greatest similarity to Xenoblade 2 is the refusal to hold anything back in being itself. Its lore seeps into each and every part of it with its magnum opus, the battle system. Mira alone is proof of creativity, and while the levels are inconsistent, exploring them never fails to be valuable. Coupled with rewarding long-term quests, and there's an immense potential for an exceptional JRPG. Key developers were interviewed by Nintendo themselves, and it begins with the director outright admitting they would have preferred a full-on remake, lamenting the lack of demand. And how could you blame them? The antiquated design is too fundamental. A by-the-numbers remaster can only alleviate, not fix. If Monolith Soft were to ever properly revisit this IP, I genuinely believe it would thrive. given all of the lessons they've learned in the past 2 decades. But although this remaster is devoid of heart, the game itself still has so much of it. I wasn't exaggerating about that ending. It is one of my most beloved finales in any piece of fiction. Would it have been wiser to choose Xenosaga all those years ago? Undeniably. But I don't regret taking the road less traveled by. Everyone lives with contradictions. The desire to be loyal but to abandon. To be free but to be secure. To live but to die. And for better or worse, that is the fate of Baten Kaitos. A contradiction. A missed opportunity to revitalize a hidden gem, yet a diamond in the rough I cherish the mere sight of. Thanks for watching.